one of the great components that I'd like you to think of is going back to the framework, is that different types of companies fit in different ones of these quadrants, where their culture is predominantly one of these quadrants. Or you can also think of it in the terms that different departments get major funding. So who can hire, which department really can hire, and all those things. So, walk us through maybe, the red quadrant, very controlful. What kind of companies, would tend to have that type of culture?
Well, again, if you look at the quadrants there, a lot of organizations are in control. So you're going to see maybe finance, we got to have tight control, accounting firms, things like that are going to be very control-oriented, control-focused. A lot of manufacturing, again, is heavily down here in the produce, right? We've got to meet those deadlines, we've got to make that. But oh, by the way, we've got to have quality there too. So we have a lot of quality control. So again, manufacturing, some of you guys, as you assess your organizations, and if you are in the manufacturing realm, will probably find yourself very heavily down here in the probably produce or control, and maybe you want to shift, I'd like to have much more of a team orientation there.
Correct.
And that's where the OCAI comes into play as well. But we're looking at what behaviors then would I shift in order to get more team oriented.
So your aspired to culture might be more yellow as at manufacturing. So how do you get from being predominant 80% blue to maybe 70% blue, 10% yellow?
Right. And think about in manufacturing, we always talked about basically QCD. We're going to compete on quality, cost, and delivery. And the quality is a given, right? Nobody wants junk, so quality is a given. And delivery, we'll talk about Hofstad at some point, but our focus here in the U.S. is very short-term oriented, right? It's immediate gratification, and so delivery isn't something that we can compromise on either. So it really comes down to cost, right? And that quality, cost, delivery. Cost is who can do it for the lowest price, and so that's where you see so much focus on the production and so much focus on the control in a manufacturing environment.
But like a medical center, a hospital, so do they have these four quadrants in a hospital? So totally different than a manufacturing, but like what comes to your mind when thinking of hospitals? And
well, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this course, because my background really becomes is heavily in manufacturing, but I enjoy seeing some of the other industries that we have, people in healthcare, people in education. Well, I guess we're in education.
We're in
now.
education,
but,
yes.
But I see it, people talk about their culture in their organization, and there are organizations that are much more focused on the hierarchy and the team. But I would still think healthcare, you're going to be probably strong in the control area.
Yeah, people not dying is a big deal.
Yeah, doing that surgery right. We all hear the horror stories of somebody going in and having surgery done unnecessarily.
Right.
So I think that's a key there that would be high in that control area.
One of the companies that a lot of times you might be part of or we work with are nonprofits, churches, and so it's almost at the opposite side, so a lot of team building, friendly, but really hard on, difficult to get things done, difficult to really have accountability, and we've seen a lot of ethical failures in the church of late, and so thoughts about other maybe companies that you've seen that are maybe not, that are a little bit different than this model, or maybe not the manufacturing or.
Well, and I think that's one of situations where you see that these 4 quadrants and the 8 behaviors that go along with those are at play in every organization. It's just that there's
Right.
heavier in some, each industry probably is a little bit heavier in others. A lot of times the service industry may be, more
Exactly.
in the
Exactly.
yellow quadrant.
Yep. Yellow, green,
in the
depending
green.
if they're a startup. That's
Yep.
right.
And trying to be more, entrepreneurial or more, I guess,
They're coming up with a
Inventive.
new
Yeah.
product, the new.
yeah,
Yep.
and new
Definitely.
ways of
Yep.
bringing service. So,
Definitely.
that's where I said I love this project and this course because I get to see a lot of that from other people assessing their industry that I'm not as familiar with.
Right.
And I learn a lot from our students in the program through this, and hopefully they learn from
Right.
us as
Right.
well.
We hope so.
But that's one of the nice things. I think you're more facilitating sometimes those conversations. And again, throughout the Business 520 course here,
Right.
you guys will have the opportunity to share your assessment of your
Right.
organization,
Right.
and then get feedback from myself, from your fellow colleagues, as to, hey, we see that same type of thing,
Right.
or we experienced this, and here's what we do to improve upon that or change
Right.
it.
Right.
So I think that's been very effective, allowing each other groups
To learn from each other.
Right.
Yeah. I think one of the 501 key elements of 501 is that there's not one right quadrant. The key sometimes are like, well, what's the best quadrant? And you really don't have a best quadrant. And every company uses all 4 quadrants. And so you need to have competencies in each. Like, so for you, the control, somebody that does finance as well, they're just as important to the organization if you're the manager, so that you don't go to jail, And so that's a key part of the team. So I think of it like 4 wheels on a car. Like, which of the wheel of the quadrants do you not need? Well, you need all 4 of them to do well, because you're competing, you're racing against other companies. And so
Yeah, so with one of the 4 tires missing,
Flat.
you're not going very far.
you're not going far, or even if it's just like hobbling, you're not going to be there in the market
Yeah.
for long.
So again, even if you're very heavily in the produce,
Correct.
we've got to meet
You
these deadlines,
have to
but we
have
don't care about our people.
correct.
That's another one that we always talk about. Who's giving the customer service? Right? It's
Right.
our people. So
Right.
we can't be customer service oriented without being our employee oriented
Correct.
Organization. So we have to care for our people.
And that's an interesting component because Hofstede, so some of you come from different cultures other than the U.S., and having grown up in a European culture myself, Hofstede is really helpful in that back in the 70s, he analyzed culture by assessing IBM different offices around the world. And he gathered all this data about what is a good manager in these different contexts. And it's really interesting because when I showed up in China, it's a completely different culture than the U.S. And what we think of as micromanaging, you're in my business, therefore you don't think I'm competent, and just be completely upset with managers about. The reverse is true in China. Like, when the American manager starts to ask the employees, like, what's your idea? What are your ideas? They're translating, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what to do. Who put him in charge? So the same behavior you think you're having in one company or one culture is totally misunderstood in another. So a lot of times you'll be working for international companies, and we have the Koreans here, we have the Germans here, we have the French here. And so if you don't understand Hofstede's dimension of like individualism, collectivism, high power distance, low power distance, you're really in for some problems. Or at least you're not going to understand the conflict. You're going to think it's personal, and then it blows all up. But do you have an example that comes to mind of this kind of clash of high power distance? Or
Yeah, again, taking it back to manufacturing, I remember, there was one year where we closed the books 3 different times, and it was because we were bought out by a holding company and then bought out by a French company. And it was really interesting, the cultural clash there. And I think about probably myself and some of my colleagues, the arrogance that we had, and then we had the French culture coming in. And
no less arrogant.
and it was one of these, we're going to do it my way,
right,
or the highway.
Right.
And so they come from a high volume automotive manufacturer facility, and they wanted to ram that down us, where we were in a basically
niche kind of.
Right, we were making heavy duty charge air coolers and radiators for the automotive industry, and again for Volvo and Mack trucks,
right,
and
right.
So heavy duty semis. And so we're making 50 to 500 a year.
Right.
And so they're coming down and saying, hey, we're gonna
crank up production.
Yeah, and we're gonna have 2 different size totes, and that's it. And we're gonna do everything with these 2. So we're gonna have a 400 millimeter returnable tote and a 1,000 millimeter. And I said, well, guys, that just won't work here. I said, well, you have to think outside the box. Well, that's what we're going to do. And I said, well, this
is going to go well.
So, I went down on the floor and I grabbed 2 1,200 millimeter radiator tubes and brought it up and threw it on their desk and said, package those in one of your 2 boxes. And again, my heart wasn't right. I was being very arrogant.
Yep.
And I walked away and looked back and watched those 2 guys sitting there scratching their head about, maybe this won't work. But yeah, I think it was a kind of an antagonistic relationship.
Right.
But now understanding and studying some of Hofstede's framework there, I see where that comes from. It's not organizational culture as much as it is organizational culture, but it's impacted by national culture, not the organization.
Yeah, we are products of our education and our socialization. So, but the beauty is that God enters that mess of ours, and His objective is for us to be like Christ, to love others and serve Him. And in the workplace is a fantastic place I've found to do that. And some of my best relationships have been with colleagues of like heart and like mind. So, to me, what has been beautiful is this cross-cultural component that can't be faked. You can't just say, this worked here and I'm going to shove it. You have to work with people, be people focused, and then also when you're frustrated, check yourself. Like, what is it in me that's, like you said, where's my pride happening? And so I think as you mature as students and as managers, then you have a lot more perspective.
Well, I think a couple of those points that Hofstede raises is, long-term versus short-term oriented.
Yes.
And so here in the U.S., we're very short-term focused.
Absolutely.
We talk about a 3 to 5 year plan as long-term, but if we're not
quarter to
halfway
quarter,
through the month, we're in the red. Oh my goodness, all hands on deck. Forget the long-term. What are we going to do to make sure we're in the black?
Yep.
And then you're talking about in China and that much more long-term focus.
Absolutely.
So they're willing to
look at
things out
decades ahead. Yeah.
And so when you're managing a group of people that come from a different culture, and that one, like we're so I know myself, I'm so gotta get it done now. This gotta happen, and that wouldn't work very well if I went over and tried to manage a Chinese firm with that type of mentality.
Yep, that's exactly right, and that's why it's so important to learn these frameworks, because they're very useful in the practical day-to-day. And as you get promoted in your organization, you're going to get promoted to manage people. And then as you keep on getting promoted, you're going to manage international teams. And so this becomes more and more kind of your toolkit, where you can really kind of hone in on your added value to the company. And so that will be, for you students, it'll be something that will continue to grow and develop. So this component is like study the framework, start to work with them, look at your colleagues or your classmates and look into their stories, because really it's very rich in lessons to pull out.
And I think about another one. We're probably much more individualistic in our decision making here in the U.S.
Yes.
And again, if you're managing on the Pacific Rim, they're much more collectivist and consensus oriented. We're much more individualistic and probably more confrontational in our style. So again, taking that style without understanding the context of the national culture can be a real rude awakening for you.
Right.
If you're managing a foreign entity.
So you have those three dimensions at play. You have the spiritual core dimension. You have your, I should say, national culture component, how you perceive right or wrong, being micromanaged or not, all that stuff. And then you have your management skill sets, and so you bring all that to the table, but then you have to adapt it to your workplace environment. And I think that's the beauty of the leadership component that you're getting here.